What's up, everybody? So I want to do a short little Mannun's Minute all about the word Warlock. I have a full video I will link in the description below if you want to further research this situation. But this is just a shorty to express my thoughts on this term. Anytime I mention that I personally like the word Warlock in one of my videos, I get a bunch of people telling me I must be an idiot because Warlock means Oathbreaker and how dare I. Well, let's break this down so those of us who follow false rhetoric can better understand. For a long time in the Wiccan and modern witchcraft community, the word warlock has been treated like it's got a curse attached to it. You'll hear people say, oh, never call a witch that, it means oathbreaker. And sure, that's been passed around so often it's practically become an unspoken law in some circles. But here's the thing. When you dig into history, instead of just repeating the same warnings, the term might not be as scandalous as folks make it out to be. Let's start with the dreaded oathbreaker label. Yes, in Old Scots, warlock can be traced back to a word that means traitor or breaker of oaths. But the question we should be asking is, whose oaths? Again, the question we should be asking is, whose oaths? Because if we're talking about medieval Scotland or anywhere in Europe during the height of the witch trials, the only oaths that mattered in the eyes of the authorities were the ones made to the church. That means calling someone a warlock was often accusing them of breaking their loyalty to Christianity, not betraying other witches. Think about that for a second. If you were a pagan, a witch, or even just someone who didn't toe the church's line back then, being a warlock in their eyes meant you had the nerve to step away from the religious system that held all the power. That's not dishonorable. It's actually pretty rebellious and brave. It was their insult for someone who turned their back on their spiritual monopoly. From that perspective, the word's not so much a smear, it's a badge of defiance. Here's where it gets even more interesting. In early witch trial records, warlock wasn't even used exclusively for men. That's a modern misconception. The term shows up for both genders depending on the scribe and the region. And it wasn't always tied to witches at all. It could be used for any so-called heretic. So when someone spits out oathbreaker in those documents, it was usually shorthand for this person has broken their allegiance to the church and that's unforgivable. In a way, that flips the meaning on its head for us modern Wiccans and witches. If we're not part of that old religious system, then breaking their oaths is exactly what we've already done by existing outside of it. We don't owe fealty to a doctrine that condemned our ancestors and burned our spiritual predecessors. So why fear a word that was once used to identify those who dared to walk their own path? Of course, part of the hesitation in our community comes from Wicca's initiatory oaths. We take them seriously and rightly so, but the oaths we make are to our coven, our tradition, our gods, and ourselves, not to the church, not to a bishop, not to the state. The oathbreaker of medieval times wasn't a witch betraying their own. It was someone refusing to bow to the cross when told to. That's an entirely different story. Now, I'm not saying we all need to run out and start printing Proud Warlock on our t-shirts. Language is personal, and words carry different energy for each of us. If it doesn't sit right with you, there's no reason to use it. But I'm saying that the blanket never ever say it rule might be more superstition than solid fact. Words evolve. They shift with culture, reclaiming impersonal meaning. Take the word witch itself. Once a term used to justify torture and execution, now proudly worn by people all over the world. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people all over the world. The same transformation could happen with warlock if we stop letting outdated fear define it. For some, reclaiming the word might be an act of power, taking back a label the church once used to demonize independent thinkers and turning it into a mark of spiritual sovereignty. Again, warlock, the word, is not much different than the word witch and the negative connotations that it carried up until this day and age, and even into this day and age, which is still negative in a lot of eyes and ears. In the end, warlock isn't inherently evil, shameful, or treacherous. It's a piece of historical language that, when you peel back the layers, tells the story of people brave enough to break away from an oppressive system. And in that light, maybe it's not such a horrible term for Wiccans to use after all, especially if we remember that the oaths being broken were never ours to keep in the first place. So next time someone drops the "it means oathbreaker" line, you can smile and say, yes, but let's be clear, those were their oaths, not mine. And in doing so, you might just reclaim a little piece of history that was never truly theirs to own anyway.